Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It's another pretty crappy day here in Mid Coast. The rain is it's not raining right now, but it's pretty overcast, pretty cold. Actually, had to turn the heat on last night. It was kind of ridiculous. But hope everyone's doing good and great. It's a great weather climate to watch movies, and that's I watched a ton of movies last night. It was pretty awesome. I mentioned I did a video yesterday where I talked about this giant video haul of all these movies I just bought. Opera House Video was doing this massive sale of a bunch of like inventory videos, things that never really get to the actual store, the storefront, and that get put in the aisles. So they've just had a huge abundance of and I guess pretty inundated with so many movies and tons of titles that they just don't have room for. So they had this like insane sale on Saturday where they were selling off all of those movies. And it was pretty awesome because they get the direct profits from the sales and all those things. And they were selling, um, they had probably almost 1,000 different titles. It was kind of insane. They had a bunch of their Blu-ray selection was okay. It was actually pretty small, but I got some Blu-rays. I got about 5 or 6 Blu-rays, which I'm really excited to watch. And I got quite a few movies. I got about, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 movies altogether. So they were selling, most of the things that they were selling were DVDs. So really excited. And I got there super early on Saturday. The sale was going from 11:30 to 4:30 on Saturday, and I got there at about quarter after 11. I was actually the second person there waiting. There wasn't a whole lot of people there. I was there for about an hour. Well, there was a pretty good. There was probably about 5 or 6 people that came after after around 11:30 had started. It was supposed to be the sale was supposed to be outside, but the rain it was raining all day on Saturday, so they had everything inside the shop, and they basically set up a couple of tables, and then they cleared out a couple of areas, and then they put all the boxes of movies in those areas. So it was pretty awesome. I was super excited by what I got and what I found. I got a shit ton of movies that I've never seen before, and a bunch of movies I've never even heard of before. I got some killer exploitation movies. I'm super excited. And today, and what I wanted to do was review. I watched 4 movies last night. It was pretty intense, but amazing. I yeah, I was just blown away by the by how I lucked out with these purchases. So what I wanted to do for the next few videos, or a bunch of videos, because there's a whole ton of movies here, was I wanted to review each one of these movies and talk about them. They're all over the place too. I got a lot of good horror movies and exploitation movies. I also got some foreign films, 1 or 2 documentaries. So, and most of these movies, there's probably only 2 or 3 of these movies that I've seen before. The rest are all first time viewing and first time buying them. But it was such an incredible bargain. So I'm a huge collector of movies, and I obviously watch tons of movies. So this today's show is going to be about the first movie I am going to do. So this first movie, oh my god, this movie was so awesome. And like I've said before in previous shows, my favorite genre, I love all kinds of genres, and you'll see that in this pack. There's the first half is a lot of kind of horror exploitation kinds of things, and then after that we kind of broaden a little bit with other genres. But like I've said before, I love all kinds of styles of filmmaking, everything from foreign films to action movies. I love a lot of animated movies. I love dramas, mysteries, and horror and science fiction being my favorite 2 genres. And within those 2 genres, my favorite genre of all time is the world of the exploitation film. It's kind of my obsession. I just love the grittiness of how those films were shot. The exploitation world was a massive thing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It was pretty much an explosion. Even in my searches and in some of my purchases and things that I've discovered about the exploitation world, and even in the horror exploitation world, is that it even goes back to the 50s. I've gotten some movies that are in the 50s, so it's pretty amazing how far back, with all of these decades, this beloved genre goes back, and the tracing the lineage. So with the exploitation world, particularly around the horror exploitation world and the giallo world, I just love the grittiness. I love that the filmmakers, on one hand, take themselves very very seriously, but at the same time they don't, and there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor to it. I love the punk rock ethic behind a lot of these films. The basically where there's no budget, there's sometimes no real plan behind how they will shoot something, and they just kind of go for it, and it just gives these films a level of rawness that I just really really love. And I am a big fan of sometimes when things are just kind of bad, but they're so good, and they just have this balance of those two things, and they make for just an incredible uh, escapist feeling. And to me, and when I think of it too, I think in it's essentially people who love films, and when you have a good movie going experience, or a movie watching experience, it's hopefully about escaping your day for a couple hours into this other world, essentially. And I feel like with the exploitation world, it really is is all about that. It's really pure, unadulterated escapism. And I think all of those other characteristics that I mentioned that make up, I feel, that make up the exploitation films, just even enhances that whole experience. So today's movie is, again, this is a movie I've never seen before, never even heard of it before, and it came out in 1974. And my favorite genre, like I've said too, is of all time is the slasher horror exploitation genre. I just love. If you give me a good slasher movie, I'm a happy camper. It doesn't matter what day it is, what time of day it is, what mood I'm in. I can just watch slasher movies to the cows come home. And this was a killer discovery. This was a fantastic exploitation slasher movie, and that is Don't Open the Door from 1974. I got this on DVD, and it's I had never seen this before, and this movie is so awesome. I so was blown away by this. I watched this last night. It came out in 1974. Really interesting history too behind this film. I did some been doing some research about it because it's a thing too. What I like to do is, especially when it comes to films that I've never heard of before, I love to find out information. And it was directed by S.F. Browning, and it stars Susan Bracken and Larry O'Dyer. It came out in 1974, and it was shot by S.F. Browning. Sorry, he was the director, and he was apparently a pretty big exploitation movie director in based out of Texas. And this movie is such a great slasher film. The atmosphere, the whole film takes place. The whole premise of the movie is about this little girl whose mother gets killed, and there's about 15 years go by, and while all this had happened, they both lived in this giant house, like this huge mansion, The house that the story and the movie takes place is incredibly creepy. It feels like one part a ghost story, even though it's not. It's definitely a slasher movie. It's super raw. It's super gritty. The music is amazing. The atmosphere is incredibly ominous, and the location for this film, because again, it's shot in this big giant house that has these huge, has many floors, and the cinematography for this film is just incredible. It feels like the house is a real character in the movie. And like I said, my favorite thing about a really good horror movie is if the movie has atmosphere, really good atmosphere, and sucks me in, that is usually the winning thing for me. This film, it was shot in Jefferson, Texas, in the summer of '73. The historic house of the Seasons Inn, that in Jefferson, Texas, was the location, and it's like again, like I said, it's this massive building that has so much atmosphere, super creepy. The cinematography, there's all this cool use of shadows and kind of these long shots of where you're looking up the staircase, and it's amazing. It reminds me of some of the style of cinematography from my favorite cinematographer, Dean Cundon, who's done all of the Halloween movies. Just amazing. It and it came out in '74, and later in 1979, it was released through Capitol Films Corporation. The transfer of this too is actually really good. It's actually a really good quality DVD, which I was super excited. The Some of the DVDs that I've watched so far, quality is not so good. One in particular is not very good, but it's okay. It's pretty good. But this one's actually really good. So that was a cool find. And again, this movie, and it's interesting too because I always say that one of the things I love to do is to try to trace lineage for movies and various things of certain styles. Particularly, I've been doing that with the slasher genre, and also movies that early exploitation horror movies that you know uh, were some of the first films to have practical effects, where there's like copious amounts of gore and also copious amounts of sex. So all the great things that make all the components that make a movie good. So, and it's interesting because don't Open the Door came out the same year as Black Christmas, which also came out in '74, which I did a big show on. And that's looked at as one of the essential movies in the slasher genre, of where that served and acted as like a blueprint for all of the slasher movies that came out after '74. So it's very interesting that this came out the same year. So I wonder, if one or the other, if either of those filmmakers were aware of each other's work, and if that acted as an influence. There's similarities too. There's definitely similarities with between the two movies. Where the central characters, the slasher essentially in both movies, there's a series of all of these like perverted phone calls that are used, and that's a big part of the story. Big, huge component in Black Christmas, with the killer calling the women before these things happen, and also Don't Open the Door. It's all centered on these phone calls, and that's very interesting, and it's incredibly suspenseful. It takes place where the killer is basically, in this isolated attic or some isolated room in the house, but he's hidden away and nobody sees him, and so that is essentially the same thing as both movies. Very interesting. But I will say they are very different movies in a lot of ways because of the location. Especially Don't Open the Door. The story is quite a bit different, um, but it is the more I think about it, they're so similar. But this was just an incredible movie. Like again, like the atmosphere was just astounding. Just super cool. I'd never seen this movie before. Super, super into this movie. And SF Browning, there's not many there's not too much info on the disc as when it comes to special features. There is a pretty cool little thing on SF Browning, the director, on his career and various things he's done. And he was a pretty prolific director in the 60s and 70s. Don't Look in the Basement came out in 73. Poor White Trash Part 2 came out in 74, also known as Scum of the Earth. Don't Open the Door in 74. Of course, this one here. Keep My Grave Open in 77, and Thinking Big. Very cool. What an amazing discovery. I This is definitely one of the better slasher movies. I've made some really awesome discoveries lately of some newer slasher films. There was one that I did a show on very recently called Curtains, which is this really awesome Canadian slasher movie that came out in the early 80s, which I had never seen before either. And I got that on a collection that I bought, I think at Goodwill, which it was on this big pack with about 10 movies. And I reviewed a bunch of movies on that, and that was, such a cool surprise. The quality of that one is actually really good too. And like I said, Don't Open the Door. This transfer is actually really good. Super excited, super pumped. If I get a chance to buy this on Blu-ray, I will definitely do it. But I had never heard of this film. This was definitely a release on DVD many years ago. I think that this came out like probably originally in the 90s, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. A lot of the companies, because there's some info that I think Severn was involved with this film, and a couple of other companies at one point. But yeah, what a freaking discovery! Again, I can't stress it enough. The atmosphere, it feels almost like a classic haunted house story, even though it's not. It's very much about this unknown killer that's in the house, and the kills are really great, but the atmosphere is so awesome, super creepy. There's a lot of intensity to the scenes, and a lot of cool. There's a lot of cool tension that builds up throughout the story, which is really great. The acting's actually really good. Sarah Bracken, who is the lead, I've never seen her before, but she's awesome in this. And it's really gritty. It's got some killer. The music for this movie is awesome. Really beautifully directed too, but again, it's like super raw and really low budget, and it's got this dirtiness to it, and it's kind of it's a pretty sleazy movie too, which is another great characteristic of great exploitation movies. But what an awesome find! Super excited I bought this, and looking forward to watching this again. So yeah, Don't Open the Door, 1974, killer slasher movie. Definitely check it out if you get the chance. So this is Jason Dean. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.